Oh boy, this is the one. 5 years ago this month, Star Wars The Last Jedi came out. And I want to talk to you all about this movie. It's been talked about to death, but I want to do a retrospective going back and reminiscing on before the movie and after the movie. And with this one, we have a lot to talk about. Now, I did do one for Force Awakens. It's called Force Awakens 7 years later. This one's The Last Jedi 5 years later. So this movie literally changed the entire scene of YouTube. This movie made careers on YouTube and took careers away on YouTube. I'll explain what I mean here in a minute. When it comes to what this did to the Star Wars community, there's never, including the prequels, has there ever been a movie this divisive in the history of Star Wars, or maybe even in the history of big franchises. When big franchises put out bad movies, everybody kind of agrees. You know, X-Men Dark Phoenix, most people hate that movie because it sucks. X-Men 3, not very well liked, not the worst movie, but you know, not really something people fight over. This movie, on the other hand, things got extreme. I remember going into this movie, let's rewind back to 2016, 2017. I went to Star Wars Celebration. I went that year. I hung out with Dash Star. I got to meet Hello Greedo. Bunch of the Star Wars dudes. It was really fun. Had a great time. They premiered the teaser for this movie. Got a huge reaction. It was just so big. And Rian Johnson, let me talk about Rian Johnson because here's a controversial figure. Here's a guy who, going into Last Jedi, was a really damn well-respected filmmaker. The dude made The Brothers Bloom, he made Brick, he made Looper, and he made a couple of episodes of Breaking Bad, and he had a pretty good little track record. I mean, to the point where a lot of people were hyped to see The Last Jedi, and I remember that Super Bowl trailer for Last Jedi, and I was like, whoa, like, okay, this is going to be something. And the big story coming out of it was, where were they going to take the characters? Force Awakens opened up a bunch of mystery boxes. Who was Rey? How did Maz get the lightsaber? Who is Snoke? You know, what's going to happen with Kylo Ren? How's Luke? What's going to happen with him? Is he going to come back to fight? And if so, why did he go away for so long? There's all these mysteries that clearly J.J. Abrams had an idea of where he wanted it to go. He may not have had everything worked out, but he had an idea of where he wanted it to go. Rian Johnson had a completely different idea of where he wanted it to go. And so when this movie came out, boy, oh boy, I know before the fandom menace, before all these YouTube channels blew up making Last Jedi criticism videos, I was one of the first motherfuckers on here who straight up trashed that movie. One of the first. Go back and watch my review for it. I was one of the first because I remember seeing this film and I walked out of the movie theater so disgusted, not just because of what they did to Luke Skywalker, but because I was so let down by this whole film. And it's fucked up because I was into it for the first few minutes. Like when the movie opens, right, and you have like the escape, and even though it was dumb that Poe Dameron made mama jokes in Star Wars, I was still like, okay, well, it's a different kind of comedy. It's fine. Doesn't bother me. Okay, Luke throws the lightsaber. Okay, well, what? Why? Where's this going? And then as the movie progressed, I'm like, okay, what are they trying to do here with Luke Skywalker? I think the main problem with this film is the way they wrote Luke. But trust me, the movie has a lot more problems. And I think a lot of folks have to realize that as much as Rian Johnson has had a really good track record of films, Knives Out was good. Like the dude, he has proven he can make movies. He has. You can't deny that. I don't know what happened here. I don't know if it was Kathleen Kennedy or Bob Iger pressuring him. I don't think it was, because even he said that he was very meticulous in working with them and getting what they wanted and stuff like that, but he also had creative reign to do whatever he wanted. Well, what he wanted to do was a complete shift in what J.J. Abrams wanted to do. Now we know this. Now we know for a fact they had no plan. Even back then, I was telling people they had no plan. It's so obvious when you watch this film. There are certain character arcs that are like repeated. For example, Finn, his character arc, I think, doesn't even evolve past what happened in Force Awakens. He regresses just to get back to where he was. Rose Tico's character was really poorly written, to the point where Kelly Marie Tran got death threats or whatever she got, harassment, which I don't condone. She's just an actress doing her job. The Rey character didn't really do much in this movie. The one character that did, I would say, the most was Kylo Ren. And he is my favorite thing about Last Jedi. If I could find one thing about Last Jedi that I like, it's Adam Driver's performance as Kylo Ren. I liked every minute he was on screen. I loved it. And I liked the fact that he actually ascended to the top of the First Order. At first, I didn't like it. Because Rian Johnson just took Snoke and balled him up in a piece of paper and threw him away. Like, nobody cares about this guy. This is the Kylo story. And as time went by, I wound up enjoying that more. Like, I wound up appreciating that more, right? But it still feels like they could have done so much more with Snoke. And it still feels like, well, okay, Kylo's going to ascend. That's fine. It's the rest of the movie that's the problem. I think the issue here was that Rian Johnson, in my opinion, and we're going to put aside all the stuff that happened on Twitter with him fighting the fans and all that. Just put it aside for just a moment. Let's look at this as human beings objectively. Let's not go into our emotions here. I think that because here's the thing, guys. No filmmaker tries to make a bad movie. I think in his mind, he thought that this was the most creative and unique way to go with it. But I think that and I don't think that's true either, but that's what he probably thought. But I think that he underestimated and undervalued what Luke Skywalker meant to fans. I think that's ultimately the biggest mistake he made. Because ultimately, if this movie wound up being as bad as it was, but at the end you had Luke doing something epic, like more epic than what he actually did. I don't even call that a saber duel with him and Kylo on Crate. Like, had it been that, I think people would have left the movie theater a bit happier. But the fact that he wrote Luke like that and then didn't really give us the proper payoff to that, like, here's the thing. Let me explain what I mean by this. The idea of a Jedi being disappointed and disenfranchised with the Jedi Order to where he exiles himself away from it, in theory, that could be a great story. That could be a tremendous story. Like, think about that. Let's remove Luke. A Jedi who wants to be a Jedi real bad, hears the legend, wants to fulfill the legend, but when he finally becomes a Jedi, he realizes, you know what, these guys had issues. I like that. I genuinely like that. The problem is, he chose Luke, the ultimate optimist. And he made Luke do things and say things that are uncharacteristic, which even Mark Hamill questioned him about. Now, had this been another Jedi, let's say that this idea was used in the prequel era, because in some ways it was. Count Dooku was disenfranchised by the Jedi Order, and he turned evil, but, you know, with Luke, he didn't really go evil. He just left and disappeared. Putting the galaxy at risk for Snoke, who he knew was out there and very powerful, and his own nephew, leaving his sister to possibly die at his hands, that's not Luke Skywalker, bro. And I've said this, even the fact that he made a momentary lapse of judgment, almost killed his nephew, everyone points to that and goes, well, they ruined Luke. That's not what ruined Luke. That's not what it was, y'all. It was the fact that after that, he didn't think about his mistake and go back and fix it. Instead, he just disappeared like a coward. And that's not something that Luke would do, knowing how powerful, Snoke was. Like, why would he leave the galaxy in jeopardy like that? To me, that's a bigger crime than him just making a mistake, losing his temper over his nephew. And that was bad too. I'm not saying it's not, but I mean that, So I remember right before the movie came out, I was so fucking hyped for this film that I did something that I rarely do for films. And that's I actually stayed away from Twitter because there were spoilers coming out. And most of the time, I don't care about spoilers. Y'all should know this. I cover them on this channel. I cover them on Geekdom 101. Like, I don't care about spoilers. But for this movie, I wanted to go in completely not knowing anything. And there were early reviews that were coming out, non-spoiler ones, where everybody was praising this film. The movie is bold and unique and goes in new directions. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That sounds interesting. Huh. And that's something I got tired of. I got tired of hearing fucking Collider, whom I had been watching the Collider Jedi Council since before Force Awakens because I like those guys and I like their show. And I got so tired of Perry Nemiroff putting this movie over. Oh, it's so bold and unique and all these fucking, they wound up being labeled shills later on by people on the internet. Because their review was parodied by other media, but their review was like, oh, this is a great opening crawl. Like, dude, who gives a fuck about the crawl, dude? What about the fucking movie that sucks, but they put it over? But you know what? I have friends that like this movie. I actually understand why people like aspects of this film. But objectively, it's not a good movie. And I'm saying that objectively it's not. Let me explain to you why. The middle section with Canto Bight takes the movie, completely derails the film, and hurts the pacing. Completely hurts it. The confrontation between General Holdo and Poe and that whole conflict makes no sense. Makes zero sense. The decisions that both those characters make are just dumb. The Rey stuff was trying to do this artsy, like, indie film type of thing, and it wound up being a waste of time. And there's weird editing in this movie. Now, it's a great looking movie, no question about it. Beautiful looking film. But we expect that from fucking Disney Star Wars, who has tons of money to spend on this. Of course it's going to look good. What are they going to do? A Star Wars movie looks like shit? Well, I guess Solo kind of had that problem a little bit. But you know what I mean? Like, we knew it was going to look good. It's a good looking film. But there's so many, like, editing wonks. Like, Rey and Kylo, like, using the Force to split that lightsaber in half. All of a sudden, at some point, she put it back together off screen, and somehow Chewie picked her up and knew when to pick her up, and somehow she wound up on Crate. Like, there's so many things that are just there for convenience sake. And maybe in the original script it wasn't like that, but he tried to cram so much. Also, the plot of the First Order chasing down the Resilience, or Resistance, whatever the fuck they're called. They called the Rebellion in this movie again for some reason. They went back to Rebels again. I don't know. They're chasing him down, right? And that whole plot was boring. I mean, yeah, that worked for Battlestar Galactica, but like, it's just you're in one area for so long. Then they go to like Canto Bight, which is like prequel garbage with the casino stuff. It's like, again, the movie was definitely trying to push a message. There's no question about it. Some have called it a leftist movie. I don't like talking about politics on this channel, but there's truth to that. Like, the film definitely pushes this whole, like, rich folks are evil and greedy and whatever narrative. That, even though Disney, the hypocrisy of that is that not only is Disney wealthy, but most of the actors who worked in this film are wealthy. So, you know what I mean? Like, let's not eat each other alive completely now. So, in the movie, there's an issue with that. And people say it's Mark Hamill's best performance of his career. And I guess, in a way, I see that, you know, because he did act his ass off. But he was so miserable doing it. I mean, he warned Ryan that the fans aren't going to like this. But, Ryan wanted to kind of deconstruct Luke Skywalker. But the problem is that Luke does not need deconstructing, because Luke's already a fully formed character. By Return of the Jedi, Luke was a fully formed character. And I understand that he had trouble figuring out what to do with Luke, but what he was trying to do with Luke could have been executed in a much better way, and the film could have been better. He could have had a different reason for leaving. Even if it was a cowardly reason, he could have had a different reason. We don't know. Maybe he discovered that Snoke is some ancient entity that, he had to go to the original Jedi Temple to read up on. Like, at least that would have made sense. He finds out that Han, like, remember the scene where he goes, "Where's Han?" Then it cuts to Kylo Ren? Right there, Luke should have been like, "Yo, we gotta go." That would have saved the movie. I think it would have, possibly, Just a mess, bro. And then, like, Rian Johnson took General Hux, who in the first movie was basically Space Hitler, and made him into a comedic slapstick, like, Three Stooges character. Like, what happened to this guy? He was like this warlord that was really loyal to Supreme Leader Snoke and to the cause, while having a subtle beef with Kylo Ren. And in this movie, he's a joke. Like, a complete joke. The Porgs, like, what a mess. But I remember, I went to go see this movie, and I was in. I was with my chick at the time. I was in. I was like, okay, I'm ready for a ride. Take me for a ride. And I remember the night before, one of my friends had seen the film, right, out in Hollywood. And he told me, he said, all I'm going to say is, Snoke's not the real enemy. And I was like, really? And that was a very intriguing thing, because I thought for a minute they were going to introduce a higher person than Snoke. I didn't think Palpatine, like what they would do in 9, but, maybe another dark side acolyte or something. And it turns out what he meant was that he's not the real villain of the trilogy, Kylo Ren is. Okay. One thing I will say about this movie. The scene where Kylo Ren turns on Snoke is one of the only times I've ever been in a movie theater where I've been legitimately shocked. I will give them this. Rian Johnson has my praise for giving me that. That was one of the only times where my jaw was on the ground. Even though they telegraphed it, even though you could see it coming, when it actually happened, I was like, no way, this has balls. Where do we go from here? And then we saw the fight with the Praetorian Guards, which was very violent, and the kills were awesome, but the fight didn't make any sense. One of the worst choreographed fights ever. How could Disney have allowed this fight to make it to the movie theater? Didn't they have somebody there to say, hey, this fight's got issues? Praetorian Guards just standing around, just not doing anything. Like, oh, that was the only real lightsaber action we got in the movie, except for the one scene where Rey spars with Luke and beats him. It's like you would think that in this movie they would give Rey a weakness to cut off that, Mary Sue conversation from the first film. But no, they make her even more powerful. What were they thinking by doing that, And it's too bad because, the actors all did a great job. Like, Daisy really did the best she could. John Boyega, they really cucked Finn, didn't they? His ultimate character arc was, well, I'm going to be a coward again, even though I found my bravery at the end of the first film. I'm going to be a coward again. Because remember, he challenged Kylo Ren, a trained Jedi, a lightsaber duel. And then I'm going to go off and do some mission with my new girlfriend, who I don't really like. Then I'm going to sacrifice myself at the end of the film, which was supposed to be a great heroic moment, then she stops it. Thereby putting everybody at risk of being killed. And earlier in the film, he beats Phasma in a duel, in one of the most boring duels ever. That's supposed to be the payoff to that character where he beats his old boss. Why? She falls in the flames and dies and we never see her again. What a complete waste, dude. And this goes back to what I said in my Force Awakens video where I think that Abrams created too many characters. That there's too many new characters and too many old characters for them to all have good screen time. Because Captain Phasma was cool as hell looking, but she was clearly made to sell action figures. She didn't do anything in either of these movies. Nothing. So it's like, oh my God. And so the movie I tried watching it again recently. And again, there's certain sequences where they get things right. There are certain deleted scenes I think should have been put back in the movie to make it better. But overall, this movie really pissed off a lot of people. And like I said, it's not just the Luke thing. The Luke thing is a big part of it. Trust me. As a Luke Skywalker fan, he is my favorite fictional character. That's only a part of it. Then you've got the character of DJ. So when I first heard Benicio del Toro was going to be in the film, I got hyped. Great actor. He's been in some amazing films. Always a phenomenal performer. If you've never seen Traffic, check it out. Dude, the actors in this movie, even Andy Serkis as Snoke is phenomenal. The actors are so good and they're so wasted. So he plays DJ with the stutter. And it's like, oh my God. It was kind of cool, that he was, in the middle and, not really a part of either side. I like that, but they didn't do anything with it. What a letdown. It led to one thing that was inconsequential anyways, them getting captured again. And then the editing is so wonky. It's like when George Lucas watched Phantom Menace and was like, maybe I try to do too much. That third act before the crate battle, there's so much going on that you'd think it's the end of the movie. But it's not. We have the crate battle, and we have the Luke and Kylo confrontation, and then we have the Luke and Leia moment, which was a nice moment, I guess, in theory, but it wasn't Luke. It was that projected Force ghost. And it's fucked up because, as time has gone by, I recognize that, and this is going to be controversial for some, but hear me out. I don't think Rian Johnson's necessarily a bad dude. Should he have talked to fans the way he did? No, he should not have. Should he have not wrote them all off as man babies? That was a big mistake. But that's something that Lucasfilm does all the fucking time. And I've criticized multiple people on this channel, including that guy who directed The Boys, for doing the same shit. I'm sorry, not The Boys, Bros. Bros. The guy who directed Bros, then spazzed out on Twitter when nobody went to go see it. You can't insult the fan base and try to insult them into going to see your movie. That doesn't work. Like, it does not work. You're just going to piss them off and make them hate you. And he shouldn't have done that. It was a mistake. Now, I'm not condoning what he did. He should not have done that at all. I think rather than doing that, he should have sat back and said, okay, well, some people don't like my movie. And he's the same guy who was quoted as saying that he likes it when people love and hate movies. He likes that passion to come out. Which I think people misinterpreted what he said. I think a lot of folks have taken that quote and they think that he's like saying he purposely makes bad films. I don't think that's what's going on with him. I think what he means is he'd rather talk to a really passionate person than talk to somebody who's not. But here's the problem. People who criticize Last Jedi were very passionate. And you called them all man babies and you wrote them off. Were there some sexist men that hated the film? Sure there were. Were there people pointing out the SJW shit? Sure there were. Right? But that was not the reason why the movie sucked. That was not the reason. And like I've said before on this channel, if your only criticism of a film is that it's woke or it's SJW, like, you're not a very good film reviewer. Like, you're not. And too many people on this fucking platform do this shit, and it's so fucking tiring at this point. Everything's woke. Everything, oh my God, there's wokeness. Like, who cares? Be an actual good film reviewer and say, I didn't like the editing. I didn't like this. I didn't like that. I'm giving you real reasons, and I've always given real reasons as to why this fucking movie's got issues. It's got issues, man. It's got issues. And so, I've told you some of them here. I've got so many videos on my channel discussing this, the way that the Rose character was written. Like, you know, even like the whole never-ending story thing where the animals are being freed. That's not going to hurt the rich, bro. Because all that's going to happen is the poor people who work for the rich are going to have to pick that up. Like, they're going to have to go find those animals. The rich aren't going to have to do it themselves. It's just such a backwards ass message, bro. Just, whenever I see people say things like that, like eat the rich or whatever, like, do you know what you're saying? And I get it. There are some rich folks who don't pay taxes. I get it. I'm not going to get political here, but like, there's such ignorance there. You know? Anyways. Last Jedi. So going into this movie, like I said, there was so much hype. And so I went to Celebration, hung out with a bunch of Star Wars tubers, and apparently Rian Johnson showed up. People were in line waiting hours and hours and hours. Rian Johnson is there, and he buys everybody pizza. So it's like, you know, this dude, there's a good side to this guy. I don't think Rian Johnson's that terrible of a human being. He just didn't take criticism well. You know, he grouped everybody into being a man baby when, sure, there were man babies, but not all of us. I certainly didn't say anything that was man baby-ish. Not to mention that the problem with the movie is that it kind of shits on everything that we believed in. Like, the movie sort of pans and insults what Star Wars was. Not just with what Luke says, with what Kylo Ren says, you know, leave the past behind, forget about the past. Like, it was a very meta movie. To say, like, okay, the previous film was nostalgia bait. That's what Force Awakens was, although still enjoyable in my book. This movie's going to be different, but to this day, Force Awakens is still more enjoyable. And then the movie ends with, like, 12 people being alive or some shit like that. 12 good guys against the remaining First Order. They don't tell us anything about what's going on in the galaxy. All we know is the First Order reigns. That's it. We don't see anything else happening. We don't see a conquest of, like, you know, other systems. We don't see, like, anything political. And I'm not saying it has to be a political shit storm like what the prequels were, but give us something to explain to us what's going on in the galaxy. Why didn't all the good guys come to the rescue? At the end, like when Leia put out that beacon, nobody came to help them. That's another subversion. Don't even get me started on that stupid-ass Mary Poppins scene with Leia. Like, oh, the subversions. Like, this guy didn't even subvert properly. There is a right way to do a movie subversion to make it right. He did the exact wrong thing. Having something happen, then 2 minutes later, psych. Leia's dead. Psych? No, she's not. She floated from space back onto the ship. Light speed going through the ship. That's a new one. So, like, you know, like, the movie has a lot of that shit in it, bro. And it's just, I don't want to say it broke Star Wars. I think the entire sequel trilogy really sort of hurt what these Jedi can do. And what I mean by that is the power scaling made no sense and things got completely out of whack to where you start asking yourself, well, why aren't Rey and Kylo using the Force against the Praetorian Guards? Why? They didn't even use the Force there when you know they can use it. Dumb, bro. There's so many things about this movie that are just straight up dumb. And I think part of the problem is not just that the movie and the trilogy had no plan. I think part of the problem was that this movie was rushed. I mean, the sequel trilogy was rushed, bro. Rian Johnson had to finish that script. He was writing the script for this film when Force Awakens was still being shot. And that's why you have Poe saying goodbye to Rey at the end of the movie, but they say hello to each other at the end of this one. Like it never happened. Because you never even got to see the final film. Why can't you just cut that last part out? Like, you didn't even watch the end to see that he was there? Like, so much dumb stuff, bro. They contradict the novelization. Like, but then they want to sell it to you. Like, there's so much crap. And Disney was just bombing with Star Wars. This was the first crack of many. The next time I do one of these videos, I'm going to discuss The Rise of Skywalker, the third and final chapter in the sequel trilogy. A movie that was supposed to rectify and course correct The Last Jedi when all it did was go back on everything Last Jedi did and somehow wound up being just as bad, if not worse, depending on who you ask. But just looking back on it, man, like, this movie created careers. If it wasn't for this movie, tons of YouTubers would not be where they're at. Mauler, Geeks and Gamers, even like Drunk 3PO, those guys. I'm cool with all these guys, by the way. But it's true. Like, criticizing this film put people on the map. I think the two movies I can think of that have had the most videos made on them on YouTube is this movie and Dark Knight. I truly feel that way. There have been more long-form edited content made about this movie than almost anything, pointing out every single problem. And there's a lot of them. And this goes beyond cinema sins. And I don't know, man. The movie just has a really dreary feel to it. And not like Empire Strikes Back, which was still fantasy but was dark. This one just felt very dreary and like almost like a dream. Like it had a completely different vibe from the first one. And that's okay on the surface, but when you watch a movie and you don't enjoy watching it, or when you skip through it, because you can skip through Last Jedi and find good scenes. There is good stuff in the film. Anything with Kylo Ren and Rey, anything with Kylo Ren period is usually good shit. But when you skip through the movie, that's not really the movie. You know what I mean? When I reviewed Wonder Woman 84, it was almost like I was reviewing all the good parts and ignoring the bad. And that's my bad on that. Like, I made that mistake. But here, I'm trying to review it as an overall movie. And really, Rise of Skywalker has a very similar problem. We're going to talk about that next time. But it's just, this is Rian Johnson's big flop. Not financially, but critically. And again, I'm not saying that he's never made a movie that is this bad. And I'm telling you, I've had film school people talk to me about how bad this movie is. It's not just a subjective thing. Like, people who understand the business of filmmaking and editing have talked about how bad this movie is. They have. And there's a lot of problems. It's like Rian Johnson wasn't paying attention or something. I don't know. Maybe he was too busy fanboying out over getting to work with Carrie Fisher. He's got Carrie Fisher's last movie ever under his belt, yo. That she was in. I think this is a lot. I mean, I'm not counting Rise of Skywalker. So he was there for her last film. That's a big deal, I think. But man, did he blow it. And literally to this day, I don't think Disney Star Wars has recovered. I don't think they have. They haven't recovered from this. This movie, no matter how good The Mandalorian is, this movie did so much damage that they're like scared to put out a new movie in theaters because of what happened with this film. What does that tell you? So, Last Jedi, without question, one of the most important movies ever made, but for all the wrong reasons. And it really goes to show that just because somebody's a good filmmaker and has made good films does not mean they're necessarily a fit for Star Wars. I don't think Rian Johnson fit too well in Star Wars. I really don't. I don't think he knew. I don't think he understood these characters and how much they meant to other people. You know, it just felt like playing with action figures, like fan fiction. That's what I think about The Last Jedi going back to now. So much hype, so many theories. They were all thrown out the window. Your Snoke theory sucks. Well, what was the answer? He was just some old wizard. Then in episode 9, he was a clone. All right. Okay. But that's a different video. That's it. What are your memories of Last Jedi, good or bad? Let me know. I'll talk to y'all in the next one.